Committee. Just for the benefit of everybody watching online, I'll just do a roll call of firstly members and then...
Sorry, okay, it just went live. I beg your pardon.
Shall I start again?
Yes, please.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the Planning Policy Committee. For the benefit of the members of the public and anybody watching the meeting, I'm just going to do a quick roll call of firstly the members, followed by the officers, so we're all aware of who's in attendance. When I call your name, if you could just unmute your microphone to confirm your presence, please. Councillors, so Tony Boto.
Present.
Thank you. David Brackenbury.
I'm present.
Thank you. Val Carter.
Present.
Sylvia Hughes. David Jenny.
Present.
Thank you. Richard Lewis.
Present.
Thank you. Dorothy Maxwell.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I'm unmuted, am I?
Jill Mercer.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Stephen North. Sarah Peacock.
Present.
Thank you. Roger Powell.
Am I unmuted?
Rupert Reichhold.
Present.
Thank you. And Jake Vowles.
Present. Patty.
Thank you. And also the officers in attendance. Do we have Paul Bland?
I'm
Yes.
present.
Thank you. Richard Palmer.
Yes, present.
Anne Dix.
Present.
And also Michael Burton.
Present, thanks.
Thank you very much. The first item.
Charlie, Councillor North is in another meeting at the moment, but will be with us as soon as he possibly can be.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jenny. The first item of the agenda this evening is the confirmation of Councillor David Brackenbury as chairman of this committee for 2020 to 21. Please can all members indicate verbally if they are happy to confirm David Brackenbury as the chairman. If you could unmute your microphones to confirm that, please.
Agreed.
No, I agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Anyone disagree? Okay, I'll take that silence as agreement. Over to you, Chairman, Councillor Brackenbury.
Thank you very much, Charlie, and that's gone smoothly. And thank you very much, members, for your confidence in me for another year. So following on from Charlie's introduction, welcome to the meeting. It's the first one I've chaired as a virtual meeting, so I'm sure that members and officers will keep the straight and narrow on this. But in the meantime, we move to the agenda item 2, which is confirmation of the Vice Chairman. And this item is to confirm the appointment of Councillor Tony Boto as Vice Chairman for 2020 to 21. Are all those in favour?
Aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any? Thank you. Are there any against? Are there any abstentions? Okay, thank you. That appears to have been carried by acclamation. We move now to agenda item 3, which are apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. I've received apologies from Councillor Sylvia Hobbs this evening.
Thank you very much. Brilliant. Let's now move to the minutes of the meeting, which was held on the 20th of January 2020, when we were all together, and it was rather easier to do these things. May I sign these or indicate that I will sign these as a true record of the meeting on the 20th of January?
I would like to speak.
Councillor Maxwell, please.
You've got to click on the...
Councillor Maxwell, you may speak.
Yeah.
I may speak.
Yes.
You hear me?
Yes.
There's something not quite right. There's duplication of you talking. Several people talking.
Okay.
Anyway, I would like to make a point about the minutes on the 20th of January.
Yes, please.
Right. Okay. I see it's going to. Okay. Thank you. I see that this.
Right, Councillor Maxwell, speak
Okay,
quite
I'd like
deliberately, but do speak.
All right, I'd like to say
Yeah.
Oh. Following the draft plan is coming up. This has, yes, speak. Right. Okay. What I'd like to say is the minutes of the meeting on the 20th of January, that part of this will be heard again in number 7. That's correct.
Well, elements of it will indeed. Are you making any comment as to the accuracy of the minutes of this meeting? You have to be, if you're making any comment really about the minutes of the meeting of the 20th of January, it has to be whether or not those minutes were accurate. You can't bring in other business on this item.
Right, understand.
I've seen you, Councillor Mercer. Councillor Maxwell?
Oh.
Are you making any comments about the accuracy of the minutes of the 20th of January?
No, I'll leave it until it comes to question 7.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mercer, please.
Yes, on the first page, there is a typing error, which has led to it saying that it's a daft local plan instead of a draft local plan.
Okay, that is probably something that would, indeed, I see it. It would be wise probably to change the minutes in that regard. Thank you, and well spotted. Okay, are there any other comments on the minutes? Brilliant. Okay. We will now move to receive any declarations of interest from members. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay. And are there any questions by members under Council Procedure Rule 10.3?
No questions were received, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Well, we now move to agenda item 7, which I've got a computer on my desk. It's difficult. Which is the response to the focus consultation representations on the proposed additional housing site allocation at Rushton Lakes West and a free school proposal on land to the south of Chalveston Road, east of Higham Ferrers. As I indicated earlier, we have 2 public speakers who'd like to address the meeting, and very welcome you both are. So I will first call Mr. Will Oddie from Crown Estates. Mr. Oddie, you have 3 minutes, and we very much look forward to what you have to tell us.
Evening all, thank you for your invitation. My name is Will Oddie, and I'm a Senior Development Manager at the Crown Estates. We are the owners of the proposed site allocation at Rushton Lakes West, as well as the adjacent Rushton Lakes retail and leisure development. Located on the edge of the Rushton urban area and immediately adjacent to the strategic highway network, this site represents an excellent opportunity to deliver a high quality and sustainable development. Development at Rushton Lakes West will contribute significantly to the local housing requirements and benefit from the site's proximity to the range of facilities, services and amenities available at Rushton Lakes and the surrounding natural environment. We believe in making great places, and the best and most sustainable way of doing this is through mixed use development. We recognise that the development of the site will be residential led and can accommodate a wide range of housing types, from larger family homes to smaller dwellings to cater for downsizers and later living. The site could also deliver business and employment uses, as well as tourism, leisure and community facilities. We have been engaging with local stakeholders in the community, and there is a clear demand for these non-residential uses, which will help deliver jobs and economic growth. Our team has worked over a long period of time with both Natural England and the Wildlife Trust to enable the delivery of Rushton Lakes. One of the major successes of Rushton Lakes is to realise how development and nature conservation can go hand in hand, and Rushton Lakes is home to the Wildlife Trust Neem Wetlands Visitor Centre. Our team are therefore in an excellent position to design a development which mitigates its impacts on the surrounding natural environment and have a significant amount of our own survey work to draw upon and to share. As part of the ongoing consultation, we have altered our emerging master plan to remove all development from the 2-hectare fields in the northwest corner of the site and are proposing a range of other measures that will be of benefit. These will include providing over 8 hectares as open space and minimising access to the Ditchard Reserve by the use of water features, landscaping and alternative routes. Maximising connectivity within and beyond the site is one of our master plan's fundamental principles. Planning permission has already been granted for a new link road, and this provides an access to the site from the public highway and enables the existing bus, cycle and pedestrian routes that operate at Rushton Lakes to be easily connected into a wider local network. In addition, a new planning application for the link road has recently been submitted, and the improved design is intended to enhance this connection even further. In addition to the physical connections, we would like Rushton Lakes West and Rushton Town to have a mutually beneficial relationship, and the development should create new homes and jobs that will appeal to people locally. We would like to bring forward initiatives such as our current Recruit Rushton Lakes programme to connect the local workforce with new jobs in the area. And last year alone, 67 people found employment through this route. Therefore, to conclude, as a responsible business and long-term investor in Rushton, the Crown Estate are committed to creating a well-connected and sustainable place that is respectful to its natural surroundings. This site is available now to meet the Council's additional housing requirements, as well as bringing employment and economic benefits. We therefore welcome that, following consultation, Rushton Lakes West is still the preferred option, support the officer's recommendation, and look forward to working closely with the Council and the community to bringing forward this fantastic opportunity. Thanks for your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Oddie. That was useful, I think. I'd like now to ask Mr. Richard Crosthwaite from Gladman's. Welcome again, Mr. Crosthwaite. You have 3 minutes, and we very much look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Chair. I'd firstly like to thank this committee for accommodating my request to address you regarding item 7 on tonight's agenda. This is very much appreciated. This evening, the Planning Policy Committee has recommended to approve officer responses to the representations that were received as part of the Local Plan Part 2 focus consultation held earlier this year, and to approve further work focused on the designated growth town of Rushton, and including Rushton Lakes West, to provide robust evidence to inform the Council's approach to delivering future housing requirements in support of the pre-submission version of the plan. The focus consultation was, of course, held alongside another interrelated consultation on the emerging Rushton East SUE Master Plan Framework document, the progression of which forms an important element of the delivery of Policy 33 of the North Northamptonshire Core Strategy, and a large portion of housing delivery within the plan period to 2031. The process of finalising the Part 2 local plan and completing the master plan for Rushton East SUE should be coordinated, as they are mutually inclusive, and every effort should be made to work proactively with all those with a stakeholding interest within the SUE's broad area to maximise delivery potential. The officer response to the representations made by Gladman, reference RLW/36 in the committee report, indicates that land at Slaters Lodge is not considered as suitable for development independently in advance of the construction of a significant element of the Rushton East SUE. However, this is not the case. In this regard, Gladman's representations show that Slaters Lodge is well located to support early and sustained delivery within Rushton East SUE in a location that will be well served by a range of facilities and employment opportunities brought forward as part of the wider master plan. A positive local planning strategy is required that integrates land at Slaters Lodge within the wider master planning of the Rushton East SUE in order to maximise delivery at the SUE within the period to 2031 and beyond. In considering the recommendation to endorse the officer responses this evening, I would therefore kindly request that this committee recognises that delivery at the Rushton East SUE can be enhanced through the approach that the Council takes from now and moving forward and finalising its master plan for that site, and that there is a significant role for land at Slaters Lodge in supporting the delivery of the vision for the Rushton East SUE within the plan period. And in this vein, we hope to continue to engage positively with the council. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crosthwaite, and I'm sure your remarks have been duly noted as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, those were the two public speakers, and I'm grateful to both of them for their comments. Moving now then to the paper itself, which is agenda item 7. You will see this is a response to the focus consultation representations. It is also to do with the free school proposal on land to the south of Chelveston Road, east of Higham Ferrers. The main part of this discussion will, I suspect, be to do with the proposed additional housing site allocation at Rushton Lakes West. I'm going to ask Mr. Palmer to introduce this paper, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Item 7 then, regarding the officer responses to the focus consultation. I'll take you through the key points of the report and then open it up for debate, questions from the committee. Okay, so back in December 2019 at the meeting of the Planning Policy Committee, it was agreed to go forward and undertake this focus consultation, and that was indeed undertaken over a 6-week period from the 10th of February this year through to the 23rd of March this year. There was a total of 52 representations which we received on the focus consultation, the majority of those in relation to Rushton Lakes West, but a number were also put forward in relation to the free school at Higham. The representations were a mix of both.
Chairman, can I just interrupt a moment? It's Louise.
Yeah.
Richard, have you got your camera switched off?
No, it's on.
Right, okay. So carry on. Got an issue then. Carry on.
Okay. Can anyone see me? Is that? Yeah. Okay. Continue.
You're in glorious colour.
Yeah, I can see you.
Right. In terms of the representations, there was representations both in support and objection of the Rushton Lakes West site, and indeed a number of representations making comment. There were also representations commenting on the free school on Higham as well.
Hello, David. Hello. There's like double bubble.
David, I will. David, you're on mute, but I'll continue the presentation. It's probably best that councillors don't speak until the end of the presentation.
Is it just before you do, Richard? Councillor Maxwell, have you got a technical difficulty? You're on mute. Could you unmute your microphone?
The problem is that you're hearing two conversations at the same time.
You're on mute, Councillor Brackenbury.
There was only one conversation going on at the time that I was hearing. Anyway, Richard, if you can carry on, please. If anybody's got difficulties comprehending what was said at the end, I'm sure that we can assist you. Can everybody hear me only now?
Yes.
Anybody who cannot, please put it up on chat. Okay, and thank you, Paul. I've seen you. Right. Sorry, Richard. If you'd like to continue, I'd be grateful. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chair. In terms of the representations, those are appended to the report, both in summary, Appendix 1 and 2, which deal with Rushton Lakes West, and secondly with the free school at Higham. And you will see from those appendices that the summary of those representations are contained in those appendices, together with the directional response from officers with any further action in the final column of those. In addition to that, which links to the website, you'll have the full redacted representations, which you can also access as well, and they will remain on the website. So the full background to the representations are available, both from this report and the website itself. Okay, to take you through some of the salient points then of the report. Initially then, we'll deal with Rushden Lakes West, and then we'll go on to the free school at Higham. Okay, so in section 3 of your report, I've broken down the key issues in relation to Rushden Lakes West, and they basically relate to environmental issues, which I'll start in a moment, and then go on to other issues, including infrastructure and alternative proposals. So in relation to the environmental issues, then, that's perhaps one of the key areas in terms of the representations that we've received. In particular, we have received an objection from Natural England in relation to the proposed development of Rushden Lakes West. Now, obviously, members, you would have read through the report, but if I can just bring your attention to paragraph 3.2 and 3.3 of your report, that basically looks at the key issues of the representation from Natural England. Just to summarise those, they have raised concerns about the proximity of the Rushden Lakes West site in respect of the special protection area of the Upper Nen gravel pits, and have requested that further work is required through surveys and also through detailed planning of access or directional issues in terms of how the adjoining SPA would be dealt with in respect of the proposed development, and also the amount of natural green space which would be required on site, which is subject to ongoing discussions. In addition to that, it's also flagged up that viable alternatives would need to be considered as part of the proposal of the plan moving forward. Maintain that at this point in time, the Council's preferred approach is to allocate Rushden Lake West as the allocation. However, this work would need to be undertaken regardless of the outcome of that piece of work. It is something that we would be required under legislation to make sure that when the plan gets to examination, it's in a robust place as possible. Okay, so that further work is actually outlined in more detail in the report, but in summary, they're the key issues that I would draw your attention to. In addition to that, consultants would also need to undertake what we call an appropriate assessment, which would look at the impacts of the impact on policies, if you like, in terms of the proposal and how it would affect the special protection area. So I think the key paragraph at 3.7 that sums that up in terms of the Habitats and Species Regulation Act would be, in terms of moving forward, we would have to be clear about the reasons of overriding public interest in terms of allocation if the objection was sustained. And secondly, that no viable alternatives to meeting the objectives of the plan. But of course, ongoing discussions and work could mean that mitigation was agreed with Natural England and the objection be removed. That effectively is the position that we're in at the moment. Okay. So moving further on in terms of the report at 3.9, I think that's a key area to consider. That basically looks at the summary of the work that's required, and I'll just highlight those 3 areas for you. So it's seeking to establish the level of mitigation required to deliver the proposed or preferred allocation at Rushden Lakes West. Additional work also to inform whether the full amount of development, which is around 450 dwellings on that site, could be delivered, or whether a smaller scale would be acceptable if an objection was sustained in that respect. We would look at that. And thirdly, to undertake assessments to inform other options in terms of viable sites that could come forward if it was found that Rushden Lakes West was not deliverable. And importantly, Chair, we as officers would seek to provide that search within the growth town of Rushden. Now, that would be in line with the strategic plan, which designates Rushden, as you know, as the growth town, and that would be the starting point for options moving forward. Those environmental issues are the key point of that first part of the report. In addition, we received some representations on the infrastructure issues. Largely they were comments, and largely they relate to work that would be ongoing to try and mitigate the impacts, for example, of accessibility around the site, but also of future education and doctors' surgery provision, etc., etc. So we would work as usual with statutory undertakers to resolve those issues and try and mitigate those problems that have arisen from those undertakers, if you like. Thirdly, we had a series of alternative proposals where developers have put forward sites that they feel are viable and deliverable. And again, that would form part of the assessment work that we're proposing to you as officers tonight. That concludes the Rushden Lakes West part of the report. In respect to the free school at Higham, that was probably a little bit more straightforward in that the councillors may be aware there actually is a planning application coming to the Planning Management Committee this week on that particular site. Most of the representations were comments on that, but we did have some more detailed comments from the applicants themselves, Department for Education, which as officers we feel that the wording proposed would strengthen the policy. They're quite detailed wordings that were put forward in the representation. Other than that, the other main issue I suppose to consider in respect of that particular site was whether or not the policy should include a wider area around the development site, because there are ongoing developments around there and the local plan could realistically provide a wider opportunity to consider those. Again, that would be written into the work that we would be doing for you if the resolution is agreed as recommended. So in terms of the implications of the focus consultation representations as a whole, as highlighted, really there would be an additional sort of series of work streams that officers would need to undertake to make sure and inform that either the preferred allocation was possible to be mitigated, or if not, what viable alternatives would exist and could be brought forward. That would involve work that would also be done externally through the council's consultants, environmental consultants, and further negotiations and discussions with Natural England to better understand their representation. In total, difficult to be precise, but we have estimated between 2 to 3 months to undertake that work and get those representations back, and to be able to provide a further report for you to determine towards the part of the summer period. That's towards the back end of that, early autumn. In terms of the submission plan, that clearly would have a knock-on effect, and that would again, rather than be submitted in the summertime, would be looking towards the autumn time for that submission. Clearly, in terms of the outcome of the work, that also depends on what we find with the work assessments that have been undertaken, but the aim from the officer's perspective in the report would be to get to that submission as quickly as possible with a plan that meets the requirements and tests of soundness through examination. There is additional survey work which has been highlighted by Natural England that would have a longer time period to deliver. So again, from your officer's perspective, I think we need to get into further detailed discussions with Natural England to understand the implications of those survey works, because they relate to bird surveys and visitor surveys, and they would be required to be undertaken through the autumn, early winter months, and clearly that is a longer timetable to take into account. So again, we'd need to understand the impacts of those. That probably sums up the key issues that have come out the representations. The recommendation of the report, Chair, would be to approve the officer responses submitted as part of that focus consultation, and you'll see in appendices 1 and 2 the action column at the end is effectively what you would be approving there. And secondly, that further assessment work focused on the designated growth town of Rushden, including Rushden Lakes West, set out in the report, to provide robust evidence to inform the council's approach to delivering future housing requirements and support the pre-submission plan be undertaken. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that comprehensive briefing. And it's certainly very interesting stuff. I mean, quite clearly, and I think I made this point at one of the times we've discussed this before, any survey that is undertaken by or for Natural England or anybody else is probably going to be somewhat unreliable this year in view of the extraordinary circumstances, because obviously Rushton Lakes is not being used as it has been and won't be probably for much of the year. And so it will have an effect on birds as well. OK, I've got 3 speakers. Did I see a finger from you, Councillor Jenny? Were you indicating you wanted to speak? You're on mute. Just nod. OK. There are 3.
Right at the end, please.
Yes, certainly. Well, there are 3 speakers who have currently indicated, and that is Councillor Boto, Councillor Mercer, and Councillor Maxwell. So, Councillor Boto, please.
Thank you, Chair. You perhaps partly preempted part of my question. I'd like to query.
Sorry.
Paragraphs 3.3 and 3.9. Obviously, the point you just made regarding any survey at this point would be quite superfluous because it would be meaningless under the current conditions. But my query was really, what is meant by measuring footfall around the Rushton Lakes area? What do they? Is that the Rushton Lakes site in terms of its existing site complex, or the wildlife associated with it around the lake? So what does it mean by footfall around the area? I'm not quite clear about what that relates to. So I'd like some clarification there. In 3.9, you mentioned possibility of 3.9b, less than the full 450 houses. Any thoughts on what we might be looking at in terms of a ballpark number lower than 350, so we'd know where we were looking for alternative sites rather than just the full 500 or full 450? Thank you.
Okay, hang on. Yep, thank you, Councillor. Richard, did you want to come back on that?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. In response to Councillor Boto, we don't have the detail of those surveys at the moment, and that's part of why we are undertaking additional work and are having ongoing discussions with Natural England. At the moment, we have their representation, and it refers to visitor surveys, so we need to understand the detail of that. It talks about between October and March roughly, which is why I mentioned the autumn-winter period, and that's obviously when the wintering birds occupy the site, if you like. But in terms of the detail, that's something we would need to understand further. Obviously, the current position with COVID-19 in terms of visitor numbers could be a factor. I wouldn't dismiss that, but again, we need to understand what the implications of that would be and whether a survey indeed could be carried out and be given, I suppose, confidence that those numbers that appeared in the survey were actually reliable in themselves. So we'll look into the detail of that, and that's something we'll be seeking from Natural England. In terms of the...
Sorry, can I just go back on that?
Yeah.
So the footfall you're talking, or they refer to, is not the footfall on the retail site, it's the footfall on the other parts of the site, i.e. the lakes and the site we're talking about.
That's right. It's the impact on the SPA, the gravel pits area from tourism, if you like. Yeah, that's exactly the point. Yes,
that's the whole problem in the first place. Yeah. Okay.
The second point.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Okay. In relation to the amount of development that could be sustained on Rushton Lakes West, again, I think the work will inform this particular approach. It's not as easy as saying, look, that there's a link road across the site and you could look at the southern part and that could give you X, which might be in the region of around 250 dwellings, possibly more. It's difficult to say. That's part of the work we will need to look at and discuss both with the promoters of the site and indeed with Natural England to see what can be sustained in terms of the removing the objection and providing the necessary mitigation. So we've looked roughly at what we think could be a reasonable capacity, but again, as I say, it depends on how much of that site can be released and how much natural green space would need to be provided on the site. But it is very much at the moment to try and understand that that objection, if you like, from Natural England can be mitigated, because the proximity of the site to the SPA is their concern, and that's what we want to work with them to understand what can be provided in terms of that mitigation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that's quite early days
yes,
in terms of your discussions with Natural England. So clearly it's a case of watching this space. Okay, thank you, Richard. Councillor Mercer, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm rather concerned about the timescales. I understand that the officers say this is necessary, but I'm just worried about the implications on we were on quite a tight time scale for getting all the stages for the Part 2 plan. And I appreciate we need to make sure it's sound, but I just wonder if they could reassure us that we will still be able to get the plan in during the East Northants, well, while we exist. I was a little bit surprised because the speaker, I think they mentioned that they'd worked with Natural England, and in past experience they have worked on. So I'm surprised that there's this query at this stage. Of course, the initial Rushton Lakes site, they've worked very closely with the Wildlife Trust and other wildlife operators. So there's been a lot of cooperation. We've got the wardens, etc. So you know, they are very experienced with this. So I'm a bit surprised that Natural England should come back at this stage, but I'm most concerned about the timescales.
Thank you very much, Councillor, and I certainly share your concern. We don't have a lot of the luxury of much time to play with, but yet we have to submit a sound document. So yes, I very much concur with what you say. Richard, did you want to take that? And before you do, is that Richard Lewis? Do you have your hand up, sir?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I'll put you down. I'll put you down. That's fine.
Thank you very much.
Richard Palmer, please.
Okay. Yeah, in response to those questions from Councillor Mercer, Chair, first and foremost, totally understand the timescale. Officers would like to get on and complete this work as quickly as possible, working with consultants to get an outcome with Natural England and to take forward and bring back to you, as I said, as quickly as we can do that. I suppose the key test would be in terms of that survey work, which isn't likely to be done quickly, and what the implications of that would be, and the extent that Natural England would require that. Some of that work is wider than the district as well. It's across Northamptonshire and could inform future development within the area. So clearly that's going to be an important part of discussions in terms of how we move forward. But I think what we'd like to do in terms of bringing you a report back as quickly as possible is to look at what's possible, look at those options, and bring you, I suppose, the package that we would seek to deliver a submission plan as quickly as possible, certainly within the lifetime of this council. That's always been the intention, and that will continue to be the intention, and I'll ensure you that the officers will be working as quickly as possible to do that. What I would say on the rest of the plan, we've made some very good progress on that. A lot of the background papers are shaping up, a lot of the other policies and the draft of the chapters is emerging. Obviously you haven't seen those for a while because that work hasn't been brought back to you, but that would be part of the submission plan. However, this element is a key part of housing delivery and does need to be addressed. So that really would need to start very quickly, and we have prior to this meeting already tried to engage with Natural England and certainly the promoters of the site, and indeed looking at the alternative proposals. So that work is, wouldn't say underway, but it's in situ, in process, if you like, at the moment. So we're very aware of that, Councillor Mercer, in terms of the timescale.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. It's key to everything we're trying to do. So, because
share it, if I could, just on the second part of Councillor Mercer's question about the I suppose the raising of these issues at this stage, we have engaged previously with stakeholders to provide evidence, if you like, to underpin the work that we brought to you last December in terms of potential options. I guess it is the way of things sometimes that a formal representation period will bring out a formal response in terms of the organisations involved. So it sometimes is when you get to those consultation periods that you find the detail in those representations, and this probably is the case in this particular situation, that whilst we know that there are pressures on the SPA, it almost takes this consultation to formalise those representations into thoughts, if you like.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much, Richard. Councillor Maxwell, please.
First of all, I'd like to say something to Paul Bland. He sent me an email saying that he had a suggestion. I'm still having problems with a duplication of speaking. So the person's speaking and then it's like a delayed background coming forward. So you've got two conversations going on at the same time.
Excuse me, Dorothy. Sorry, Dorothy, it's Louise speaking. I think, have you got the online video running?
Online video?
Yes, what the public is seeing.
Have you got the YouTube on?
Yes, are you watching the YouTube video?
No, I don't think so.
Because I think you're the only one who can hear that.
Really? But it's a problem. I'll have to carry on as if
What's the online video?
If the public are watching this, but there is a few seconds delay, I understand.
I don't know where the online video is. Where's that?
Well, it's a YouTube feed, but you don't need to worry about it if you're not in it. Okay.
No,
right. I'm sorry, Councillor, you're not getting a clear clear feed. However, you wanted to speak
I
on
do
this
want to
item.
speak. As long as you can hear me, that's the
Yeah,
main
we can
thing.
hear you well.
That's good. Right, okay. My concerns about this, right, my concerns about this, my concerns about the
It's not an
450
application.
is that it's as yeah. Right, okay. 450 houses is out on the limb. And I think the thing is that, as it says in the report, I said last year that this would not fit in with Rushden Lakes because Rushden Lakes has been designated as a different remit, and to put these 450 houses, which would mean that they would not be near schools, that they would not be near doctors or dentists or any type of infrastructure, clearly means that this development can't go ahead. And I think that to carry on, allow it to go ahead, even though you know that the County Council also agree on this, I think we have to make sure that the residents are listened to. We can't have a development which is out of sync to the rest of Rushden. It's completely off. Can't. So I'd like to know that we must remember that we've got Rushden Zoo coming up. We have enough housing stock. Why do we need this? So that's my question to this.
Okay. I think I'll pass that one swiftly to officers to explain the justification for the inclusion of this site. And remembering, of course, that Rushden is designated as a growth town. But then I'll pass you over to Richard.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Maxwell, I understand the concerns in relation to additional development within the area. That some of the representations have voiced very similar concerns. What I would say in relation to the third site at Rushden Lakes West is we haven't received any objections from any of the statutory undertakers in relation to infrastructure. There have been some comments, yes, and those comments need to be mitigated. So nobody's pretending that if things stand as they are at the moment, you could put the quantum of development, whatever that would be, on that site and say that's fine, everything else will fall into place. It won't. There needs to be some very clear work to be done to make sure that the access arrangements to education, to doctors' surgeries, and indeed to other day-to-day community requirements are actually met, because it is quite a complex site in a number of issues, in terms of it's very near to some higher order town functions, if you like, through the Rushden Lakes West shopping centre. But there are some day-to-day areas which need to be looked at and addressed, and one of those clearly would be education, which you've mentioned quite rightly. Working with the developers on that, and they are looking at sort of master planning for the site to do that. We certainly would need to look at working very closely with the county council to make sure that their representation is fully taken into account in terms of how that's done, and it would need to be mitigated to a satisfactory level. The same with highway works, which would need to be provided to the site as well. So, you know, those issues would be ongoing with the particular statutory undertakers to make sure that was taken into account. We have done some work in advance of taking this report to you tonight to ensure that there are no showstoppers in respect of that, and I think the representations that have come back through the consultation, Natural England aside of course, have shown that would be the case. Thank you.
I think Councillor Maxwell wants to come back quickly.
Thank you. You talked about the highways. Well, we know now that Highways England are looking at the remodelling Rushden Lakes roundabout, and clearly to add to this 450 houses 3 times, which would basically mean nearly 2,000 cars come down Ditchwood Lane on top of everything else. So I think really that this development can't be allowed to go ahead as it stands at the moment. And I said this last year. So I hope that you will seriously look at this, officers, and take this into consideration.
Councillor, I mean, obviously we hear what you say. Naturally, any development of any size will require the cooperation of all the various agencies to make sure that it is mitigated and it's done properly. It will be taken into consideration, obviously. Okay, does anybody? I've got Councillor Lewis, please.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Am I on air? Yeah. Okay. Yes, I mean, I came pretty late in on this committee, and I suspect some of this work was started before I got involved, and it was really around the end of last year that this short list of 5 sites appeared. It's quite obvious from the consultation results that there are some other quite suitable sites which weren't considered. And I was really very surprised to find out that this Rushden Lakes West was the preferred site. I mean, basically, it's got nil connection to Rushden, apart from main roads, and it would be very easy to argue its unsuitability rather than its suitability. And I think there's a very strong case for arguing its unsuitability. Crown Estates talked about a mutually beneficial relationship between Rushden Lakes West and Rushden Town It's very difficult to see the benefit for Rushden Town when you're going to create a satellite housing development. It'll be the furthest point in Rushden from the new sports hub, the swimming pool, the Pemberton Centre and the town centre facilities, and it'll be half encircled by a very busy dual carriageway when this virus is over. And I think this recommendation that we have needs to ensure that we get a full assessment of alternative sites and not just concentrating on how to overcome all of the Rushden Lake West obstacles. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Richard. I'm sorry, I had a little bit of a glitch there. I disappeared for a moment. Okay, I think, would Richard like to come back on that, or is it just something he's taken on board?
No, thank you, Chair. I can come back. Councillor Lewis obviously was part of the committee when we met in December in terms of the detailed work that we presented to the committee. Clearly members expressed their views in terms of their response to the recommendation. Some members objected to the recommendation, some agreed with the recommendation, but the committee obviously in total agreed with that recommendation. So I think to some degree that those representations have been raised previously. But what officers have done is to look at a number of areas as opposed to sites around the growth town, which we brought to you back in December to basically look for approval to go out to this focus consultation, which is of course what we did. At that time, we recommended to you the preferred option B, Rushden Lakes West, based on the work we'd done and the engagement we'd had with statutory undertakers. However, what we did say in the report, I think, was that we recognised that all the sites that we brought forward to you at that time, to some greater or lesser extent, had, should we say, issues that needed to be mitigated, and that still remains the case. There's, you know, all sites to some degree would need mitigation to bring forward that amount of development, and that is still the case. Obviously, what we don't want to get into is a position where there are clear showstoppers for sites. But if that isn't the case, then, you know, we will be able to move forward with that degree of mitigation. I mean, I do have sort of from that committee the areas, if it's helpful, Chair, I can show you on screen the areas that we looked at. I don't want to take the debate into a different area, but if members want to be reminded of those areas we looked at, I do have that information if that's required. But to some degree, the additional work will need to look at sites that we've previously considered, but in other respects, it will also need to look at how alternatives could be presented to you. So, for example, would we need to find the whole quantum of that development on one site? Yes, if the preferred option can come forward and the mitigation can be provided, and that's still the preferred choice which we're putting to you in the report. But if not, and part of the work that we're doing, which we have to do anyway, is to look at what conceivable alternatives could come forward and what options ultimately we could present to you. Otherwise, we get into a difficult situation that, you know, if we can't move forward from the current position, then we risk putting a plan into submission that clearly would not pass the test of soundness. So we have to be very wary of that in terms of that additional work. I hope that's given you some sort of background to where we're at. And if you do want those areas of search, I can put those up.
Okay, well, Councillor Lewis, I see your hand.
Well, just to come back on that very briefly, I mean, it seems to me, I mean, there are sites that weren't even considered at the outset, which was raised at the last meeting, and I think these need to be put into the melting pot. You know, so, you know, I accept all the information that you've presented at the meeting back in January, but not all sites were included. And I think that's the point that needs addressing in this recommendation.
Well, if I may, Chair, certainly any additional sites that could be brought forward that haven't been considered, we're more than happy to have a look at those, but we would need to understand where those sites would be. As I say, we've looked at general directions around well, not just Rushden, we went beyond Rushden, but certainly around Rushden, which is where the focus of the report looks as the growth town. We've certainly looked at the key options there. I think certainly outside of the settlement boundaries, where that sort of level of development could only really be achieved, as far as I'm aware, we've covered all those options, but I'm happy to discuss any further opportunities that we may have missed, but not aware of any, to be honest.
Okay, and obviously we are talking about a proposed development which is 450 houses, not to mention anything else that goes on. So it would be quite a substantial sort of site that we have got in our pockets somewhere else, or some combination. Okay, I'm going to move to Councillor Peacock, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been listening to the debate on this proposed allocation, and then once again it seems that all our policies from the JCS and our neighbourhood plan for Rushden have just been completely ignored. This is no way, at no point was it an allocated site. It was an area left completely unproposed for anything in order to give us a green lung around the town. The northern part of the town now is very, very sparse. We have no open space at all. The SPA and the SSI and all around that area are what we needed. We work very closely in order to work with Rushden Lakes to deliver the superb facilities that we've got. We're not disputing that. I just feel this one is a step too far. We seem to have all of a sudden had this pushed upon us for 450 houses. We still have other sites for the southern part of town that have got better connectivity. We've worked very hard with the Sue. I appreciate we've put our hands up to be a growth town, but that was really to be in the Rushden Sue area, the allocated site now. We just seem to be dotting all over the town, and soon we shall have no green space left whatsoever. I really do welcome this looking into these other development sites, because, you know, us who live in the town know there are other areas where this can be developed and probably more respectful with traffic connectivity, no environment issues. You know, we've held our hands up. We've said we'll take this property, but please listen to us who live in the town to say where we would like it to go. This is just so much out on a limb. They're not going to be joined to anybody. They're going to be cut off by the Ditchwood Lane. The connection road that they keep going on about it's there, and that is really to ease the issues with the shopping and traffic at the lakes. That's got nothing to do with any future development. We've got Wellingborough East coming on the other side of Ditch Lane, where there's going to be, well, as you can see, there's already housing, etc. going up there. We're trying to keep a nice green lung between us there. There does need to be something between us as towns. I really do, you know, as regarding timescales, we've been pushing for these timescales. We've had the setback with all the Oundle issues, and it now looks as if this has got to be pushed through quickly because we're running out of time. And I don't really think that's an argument that we can all stand up to. Every site is important to all our residents, and you know, we need to make sure that we get it right. We can't take it out once it's in. And I just feel that this site has been suddenly pushed through as if it's the be-all and end-all site. We've got no other updates on any other sites that were proposed, so that we can get a proper balance as to how they have come to the conclusion. The wildlife, they will start coming in. They do use those fields to graze on before they go onto the water sites and the SSI. The community has worked well around that area, but even there is a limit to what the wildlife and humans will work together. So far we're good, but we don't want to overstretch our mark on that as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Rich?
Yeah, just to pick up on a couple of points that Councillor Peacock made. In terms of the strategic plan, the Joint Planning Unit were a representative, well, what their response did was submitted as part of the consultation, which we have summarised in the appendices. They effectively are in support of the proposal. It is in line with the requirements of the Part 1 plan in policy terms. Clearly, there are a number of other issues that you went on to mention, and I understand that, and those issues need to be mitigated if that is to be the preferred allocation. If those issues can't be mitigated, that does put the authority in a much more difficult position. As I mentioned earlier to Councillor Maxwell, I think in terms of the highways issues, we've not sustained any objection from either Highways England or the County Council, but they will be working closely if this becomes the preferred, the allocated site, if you like, to make sure that the necessary highway issues or requirements, if you like, are put into place. But there's no objection there from the quantum of development and detail that's being proposed. So that's you know, in terms of the response, that's what we go on in terms of officer representations, in terms of officer understanding. So in terms of alternatives, I think we did sort of set out in 3.9 of the report that we certainly would be bringing viable looking at the potential viable alternatives for you in terms of that work stream. I think 3.9 is the key, where we would look at Rushden Lakes as a preferred option, but we would also look at whether that could deliver less if it couldn't deliver the quantum of development, and indeed what alternatives would be viable moving forward. And as a committee, clearly there would be important discussions moving forward to look at that and understand that. So we've not sort of closed off alternatives. I think we've said that the position we're in and the direction we received from the Planning Policy Committee back in December and January, if you like, the previous two meetings, that we would take the approach that we did and allocate Rushden Lakes West as the preferred option. We would seek to find out what representations came back from that consultation and bring that back to you, which is what we're doing tonight. You know, we treat those representations seriously, and I think the outcome of those is that the objection sustained from Natural England needs a lot of work to be looked at very carefully at how this site can be delivered if that is to be the case. So I don't think it's a case of us saying, well, that's it, that's the only option in front of us. I think what we're saying is that we now need to work through with Natural England and others to understand the position we're in and bring you that work back as quickly as possible so we can go to submission with a plan that will stand the tests of soundness at examination. That's really where we want to be. And I don't think we're saying tonight that is the only option on the table. We're saying it's a preferred option, but let's work it through and see if it can be delivered.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Richard. I think that was a helpful explanation. Okay, I've got Councillor Jenny, please. Unmute, David. Councillor Jenny, you need to come off mute.
Is that clear now? Right, okay. Unfortunately, I've got lots to say on this one. The first point I would like to make, and Mr. Bland will remember this, 2.5 years ago when I took over as deputy leader, the first management meeting I sat in, it was agreed that planning policy would get this local plan through before the end of the term of the council. Now, the council's term has been extended by a year, and yet we're still talking about it and not getting on with it. It's just not acceptable. It's the performance on this. Even at the last meeting, we were saying that yes, we can still get it through. But we must have known that there were going to be things as far as Natural England are concerned. Anybody who's involved in the construction industry knows that you've got to go through the proper channels with them. The fact that we have Stanton Cross just up the road, to me, meant that there were simple methods of mitigation that had been agreed there, and I couldn't understand. And I still can't understand now why Natural England are kicking up at this stage. So that to me is really annoying, because what this is likely to do is likely to mean that we go into the Unitary Council without a Part 2 plan, and as we do that, we will be at risk for everywhere in the whole of the district, not just Rushden, the whole of the district, whereby there will be housing being foisted upon us, which we do not want in the particular places that it's going. Now, just to put Councillor Maxwell's mind to rest as far as traffic is concerned, she needs to be aware that probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, Wellingborough Council and Highways England agreed the remodelling of the Ditchwood Lane junction. That hasn't come through because Wellingborough Council 2 years ago allowed a condition on their planning approval to be delayed. That is not helping matters. But whatever it does, whenever that traffic goes into Rushden East, Rushden from that side coming from Northampton and Wellingborough, it is bound to reduce the traffic on the main roundabout. It's common sense. So what we will end up is traffic coming from the Thrapston Rawns area and down the A6 from Irthlingborough will go into Rushden Lakes as it does at the moment. Traffic coming from Wellingborough, traffic coming from Northampton, traffic coming from Milton Keynes will go in on Ditchwood Lane and it will improve the traffic system. There's no two ways about it. It's just common sense. Now, I'm not overtly concerned as to whether we have 400 houses here or any houses here, but I do want to see that us making sure that we have got our Part 2 plan sorted. I'm afraid I disagree with Councillor Lewis, apart from the one thing he did say. We had looked at all of these items before he joined the committee. Now, I don't really want to see us going back over all of this again, because quite frankly, we are not looking after the residents of East Northamptonshire. Simple as that. So I would like to see us get on with it as soon as possible, get the local plan out, because if we don't, then we will be having houses everywhere.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. And certainly, I mean, in the absence of a plan for the whole district, we do run the danger of living by planning and appeal, and that isn't good for development. It isn't good for sustainable development in the right place, and it isn't good for finance either, because all that requires a great deal of legal fees. Okay, Councillor Jenny, you're waving your pen.
Yeah, can I just sort of add a little bit about Rushden East? That is being delayed, and that's part of the problem. I don't want to see Rushden East delayed any further, and therefore I can't at this moment in time support any applications coming in from Gladminster Slater's Lodge or whatever that's going to be called. What I would suggest, as far as they're concerned, is that when we get to doing the revision to the Part 1 plan at the joint with the JCS, which I believe, if I remember rightly, the last information I saw is starting in about 18 months, then we should be looking very much to bring that land in, because as the master plan for Rushden East is unfolding, it gives connectivity into the Slater's Lodge land. As it stands at the moment, Slater's Lodge could only be developed off the Newton Road in Higham Ferrers, and that road is not suitable to take any traffic that would be coming in as far as construction is concerned. So I'll just make that point so that the gentleman from Gladmans can hear. I would like to support him at a later date.
Okay, thank you. I think you made your point quite clear here. All right, I'm going to ask Richard just to quickly sum up from the officer point of view, and also if it becomes valuable. Councillor Peacock, I think you're waving at me, or are you just waving?
As much as I'd like to wave to you, no, trying to get your attention, the hand's probably not working on here. Can I just come back on Councillor Jenny's comments? I too want to get this local plan 2 sorted. I appreciate where we're coming from, and with Unitary just round the corner, we seem to go round and round in circles. I do feel, however, as a growth town, if we are to be that sacrificial lamb for these extra houses, that we should be listened to as members as to where they go and where they're going to be more suitable moving forward. And I just feel at this point, this application, this proposal for the lake seems to have overtaken everybody else. We've had little say on it. I don't want to delay the process, and like David said regarding the Gladmans, when we can see that coming off, but again, it's not in the right place at the right time, and that's how I feel with this one at the lakes. There are other sites within the town, to the south of the town, I think that will be more cohesive with Rushden East, etc., and other facilities within the town, and I just do feel that this is totally out of order. You know, if we're going to be the sacrificial lamb, then please let us have a bit more say in where we're going to have the housing. Thank you.
Okay, I'll ask Richard to come back in. I don't think that there's ever any suggestion that Rushden is a sacrificial lamb exactly. I think it has been long agreed that Rushden was going to be a growth town, which obviously does have some implications. But you do make a perfectly fair point about the selection of sites and how that is worked out. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, that work, hopefully after the resolution of the recommendation tonight, will start in earnest tomorrow. In terms of the development, it really is to ensure that we meet the minimum requirements through the plan period. That's the issue. In some respects, it can be seen as extra development, but it is really about meeting the minimum requirements up to 2031 in the plan period. So that, you know, that's what we're working towards, because if we don't, as the Chair, Councillor Brackenbury has mentioned, and David Jenny amongst others, that if we don't do that, we do open ourselves up to a situation where applications could be put in elsewhere within the district. Not necessarily straight away, but certainly the implications of this are, it's not a 5-year land supply issue, but it could become one in the future. If development, a lot of the development is wrapped up within 2 strategic sites in the district, at Irthing West and Rushden East. So, you know, if sites dry up elsewhere, it could become a 5-year land supply and the issue in the future. It's not in that position, and that's not the report that we're bringing you tonight, although we have got a report on that later on. But I would just stress it is about meeting the minimum housing requirements over the plan period. Clearly, the work that we will do will bring in more detail in terms of sites that we can look at, but not just sites themselves. I think it's about how the quantum of development could be divided up across sites. If, and I say if the preferred option as we currently stand cannot provide the mitigation required. But at the moment, we need to understand what the level of that mitigation is and whether it can be delivered. That's where we need to start off, really. As I say, we'll continue with that very quickly.
Okay, well, talking of very quickly, thank you. I'm going to bring in Councillor Maxwell and Councillor Mercer briefly, because we should probably move on this item. But Councillor Maxwell, please. You're on mute.
Right, what I would like to say, following what David said about looking at 2 years ago, I do agree quickly with Sarah and Richard that at the end of the day, this development is out on a limb. It can't happen because you do not have the infrastructure to actually meet the requirements of the people who would go and live there, apart from the fact that you've got Rushden Sewer, and that clearly is enough. You've got 2,500 houses going up there, How much more do we actually need?
Well, the numbers are quite carefully calculated, and of course no development is literally dumping 450 or any other number of houses in the middle of a field. It would have to be mitigated and the necessary infrastructure provided. Whether that is the most suitable site is another discussion. Councillor Mercer, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just feel we're going round and round in circles. We've just agreed the minutes of the January meeting. 3 people that have spoken against the site were at that meeting when it was decided we would move ahead with this site. We looked at that meeting, I think it was that one, or it may have been a previous one, at the different criteria, the different fors and against, all of the 5 sites that we presented with, and we came down this one. That tends to say, I know at least one was Gladman's, I can't remember what the other ones were. And the Gladman's one we said was, as David just said, okay, later on, but not just at the moment until Rushton East gets going. So I just feel I've lost sight. I think Richard has quite helpfully just provided the papers on when we said what the different sites were and what the criteria were. But I feel we made that decision. It was less than 6 months ago. I just don't, the timing it couldn't be worse. It was January we made that decision, and if we go back on it now, yes, we've got to do what the officers say here. We've got to go out and get the extra information. We've got to look at the other sites just in case. But that's what we need to do, is what the officers have recommended today. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear, Councillor. That was very, very helpful.
Thank you. It's just that all you disappeared and I wasn't quite sure.
I know we were all here. I'd just like to ask Councillor Boto to make a comment. You're on mute, sir.
Is that better? Right, okay. Really, I agree entirely with Councillor Mercer. We are going round and round and round in circles. We actually discussed this December meeting and ratified it in January. We can't go on like this. We have a local plan to meet, and I wholeheartedly agree with Jill and with David Jenny. We must get this thing moving. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody else would like to speak on this? Is that Councillor Peacock?
I understand what Councillor Mercer's saying, but I said there have been sites that have come forward since then, which we probably think are more suitable, and I think they have a right to be heard before this final decision's taken. Thank you.
I would simply say that although this item suggests Rushton Lakes West as preferred option, it isn't the only option, and that other sites, if they are viable and meet the necessary criteria, can still come forward. I'm just going to ask Richard Palmer, Mr. Palmer, if he can confirm that.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Yes, clearly the work that's been undertaken to date will form the basis of moving forward. I was just trying to get the sites, the areas that we looked at up on the screen for you, which I've now got, so I can show you those in a moment. But certainly, that would form the initial starting point for the work. But as I said before, I think it's the layer that we also need to look at is whether it's deliverable on one site or whether it's deliverable on more than one site, and that's something which certainly we haven't explored fully in the past, and that would form a part of the work that's been and will be undertaken hopefully after tonight's meeting. I mean, do you want to see those areas of search? Would that be helpful for everybody? I can put that up on the screen if you'd like to see.
If we can quickly see the maps, particularly the maps, because I mean I do remember the discussion on alternative sites at a recent meeting.
Okay. Okay, so the sites that those are the sites in front of you in terms of, let me just put it to a scale that, okay. Okay, can you see the areas that are shaded in orange?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so there's a number of areas from the top downwards, if you like. So there's Irthing West up here, land to the, what would be the northeast of Irthing around Frontier Farm, Frontier Centre around there. Then there was Bypass Farm over to the north of Irthing, Rushden Lakes West over here, and then further around the Slater's Lodge site, which we've spoken about earlier, and then land to the south of Newton Road, to the east of Rushden. Those were the areas of search that we looked at and brought to you back at the December meeting. And it's important, I think, to put that up because obviously there's been discussion with members during the meeting about other areas that may be considered. None of those areas came out, to my knowledge, at that particular meeting, and none of those have certainly been added into the work that we did and brought to you. However, of course, we are open to further discussion on those as we seek to take into account the work that we want to do. In addition to that, if we're looking for slightly smaller sites as a different layer of the work, then that may open up some additional opportunities. But I think what we wanted to do and what we did as officers to bring to you was areas of search. They're not sites per se, but they're areas of search around Rushden and Irthing at the time. That's what we did. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Richard. And I think that was actually quite useful just to remind ourselves what we've been discussing previously. OK, is there anybody else who would like to speak to this last chance? Because I'm going to move to the recommendation otherwise. Anybody want to speak? Right, OK. In that case, he says, hurriedly trying to find the right page. OK. I've got recommendation at 14.1. The committee is recommended to approve the officer responses to the representations submitted as part of the local plan focus consultation, which is appendices 1 and 2. And it is also asked to approve further assessment work focused on the designated growth town of Rushden and including Rushden Lakes West as set out in the body of the report to provide robust evidence to inform the council's approach to delivering future housing requirements in support of a pre-submission plan. May I have a proposer?
Move, Chairman.
Thank you. And a seconder?
I'll second it, Chairman.
OK. Thank you. Now, this is going to be done by acclamation. So just to explain, I'm going to ask for all those in favour, all those against and any abstentions. If the noises are obviously of an equal or the similar volume, then we'll have to go to a recorded vote. So on this, on 14.1, may I ask all those to unmute everyone to unmute their microphones, please? Does everybody unmute their microphones? All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those against? Are there any abstentions? Then I think that the item is carried. Thank you. You can mute your microphones again, please.
Chairman, you've got to do 14.2 as well.
14.2.
You only took 14.1 there.
Okay.
Chairman, I haven't got a 14.2.
No, why?
14.1.1 and 2.
14.1 and 2.
Oh, can we?
Councillor Maxwell, yes.
Sorry, I
We're looking at agenda item 7.
Yeah.
The recommendation at 14.1, 1 and 2, which has just been carried.
Chair, if I could just interject,
Yes.
I do recall that you read out both of the recommendations 1 and 2 and asked the committee to vote on that, which they've done. So you've covered both of them in one go, effectively.
That was my understanding, and that's what I moved.
Yes, thank you, Councillor.
That's what I understood as well.
Yes. Has anybody got any difficulties with this? Because we've already voted on it.
I didn't think we'd gone through 14.2.
Well, we did. I read out both recommendations verbatim, and they the motion was carried unanimously.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Good. Moving then, ladies and gentlemen, to agenda item 8, which is the supplementary planning document for householder extensions, which is actually quite an interesting document. Is somebody speaking?
Yeah, could I?
Councillor Maxwell. Right. Yes.
Right. Can I just ask a question?
You may.
Can I ask a question?
You may.
Right. Have we gone through the free schools then?
Right. The representations that were submitted as appendices 1 and 2 included the free schools. On that was the responses to representations at the item 1, which we voted on. We also discussed item 2, which is further assessment work, including Rushton Lakes West, as set out to provide robust evidence to inform the council's approach to delivering future housing requirements. Are you okay with this? Have you got there on that?
Chair, if I could help Councillor Maxwell.
I just wanted to talk. I didn't realise that we'd actually discussed the free schools.
Well, they are part of the consultation response representations.
Well, we weren't able to give comments, make comments on it.
Well, we did.
It's too late.
Yes, it is.
Right.
We have covered this item and voted on. So I'm afraid we have to move on to the next item of business, which is agenda item 8, and a supplementary planning document on householder extensions. I think I don't know who's taking this. The person originating the report was Wayne. I don't see Wayne here. Is it you, Richard?
It is, Chair, for this one.
Okay, yes. Excellent. Short straws always. Good.
Yes, thank you again. The householder extensions SPD is something, again, that's been out to consultation following our January meeting when we brought you the draft of that particular document. There were a number of comments made on the evening at the PPC meeting, which we've taken into account prior to putting the document out to consultation. So that consultation took place for a 6-week period, parallel, if you like, to the local plan consultation from February through to the 23rd of March. We received a number of representations on the document. Those representations numbered around I think it was about 10 parties that made different comments on the particular document. I would inform you that all of those representations we've taken into account in terms of making those changes to the document, if you like. They all made sense to do that. The supplementary planning document, what's it about? Well, it amplifies the policies in the existing plan, so it doesn't change policy, it just amplifies it. And the two policies that it would help to explain are policy 2, which is relating to the historic environment, and policy 8, the place shaping principles, both of which relate to the joint core strategy. So that's where this document will lie, and it will be district wide. So the implications of it will come into effect in terms of all the wards where applications are submitted for residential extensions. I think it hopefully reasonably straightforward, Chair. I think sort of the details laid out in the document in terms of the representations that have come in and those changes. There are no fundamental changes, I don't think, that have come about through the consultation. As I said, we've reasonably detailed responses which we've been able to take into account. And we've explained within the report what we've done to do that, and in most cases it's been reasonably straightforward in terms of being undertaken that. It is a draft document, so some of the depictions and illustrations in there will be finalised for the final document, and they will be improved so that the final version will be up to the standard that we would anticipate as the draft document in front of us tonight. But we would hope that the information in there will lead to an improvement in applications and more clarity for case officers in terms of dealing those applications in the future. Certainly the previous document is quite an old document now, and that dates back to as far back as October 1998, which is the document that it will replace. So that's really all I've got to say on the document, Chair. It's over to any questions from the committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. It's actually quite an interesting document, and there's been a lot of thought and work put into it, as well as a fair amount of trigonometry, which pleases me. The one comment I would make is on the matter of extensions and boundaries, is that it says, I'm just trying to remember where it is, so please forgive me, but it says that it is best practice that an extension should be at least 1 metre from the boundary, and I'm just wondering whether really, because otherwise you're never going to be able to maintain it without going onto your neighbouring property, and I'm just wondering whether best practice is the right thing to say, or whether it should perhaps be a little bit firmer. But that's my only question on this one. I guess that was taken in. I guess you noted that, Richard, did you not?
Yeah, apologies. I didn't know if you want me to come back on that. I mean, yeah, I can take that into account. I mean, I suppose it's down to the case officers in terms of trying to maintain that as best practice, really, as it states in the guidance. It is guidance at the end of the day, but certainly in terms of being able to maintain properties, that would certainly make sense, and the onus would be on applications to consider why they didn't want to do that, as opposed to ignoring it, really. You know, the guidance is there for a reason.
Okay,
that's the line we would take.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate that. Okay, Councillor Maxwell, please.
Looking at the document, I would just like to wonder whether we could make a suggestion about tandem parking, whether we could say no tandem parking. Is that a possibility? And equally, we also mention about having PowerPoint for electric cars in every new house that's built. Is that a possibility? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
yeah, we heard you. We heard you. I think there is some wording on tandem parking already, but
there's not. No, it just says it on tandem parking.
Limited to 2.
It doesn't actually. It doesn't say no tandem parking.
No, it's limited. It doesn't. It says it's limited to 2.
And the other one is, can we have a PowerPoint for electric cars on every new house built?
Well, councillor, this is actually about householder extensions. So
Yeah,
this would not.
that. Oh, I see.
This is not the forum to discuss putting power. Okay.
Right. However, tandem parking does come into it, and it is an issue.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Okay, it does come into it, and it has been mentioned. And your comments are noted. Okay. Let me see. I've got councillor. Oh dear, there's hands coming up all over the place. Right, Councillor Boto, please. And then could everybody who had their hand up do it again, please, just for a moment. Councillor Mercer, was there anybody else? Councillor Peacock, perfect, thank you.
Oh.
Right, me, is it?
Yeah.
Yes, I'd like to say we were following the science, I note, in this paper, and that the agent came up with some very good suggestions, which were incorporated into documents. It was nice to see that we had some public involvement, which resulted in some quite good changes. And secondly, in response to Dorothy Maxwell's comment on tandem parking, this was discussed exhaustively in January. We came to the conclusion that whilst there were some reasons for discouraging tandem parking, in some cases it would make the obstruction of the road a lot worse if you tried to bar it. And that's the reason why tandem parking does remain as part of the document. It seemed to be more destructive than helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. That is useful. I've just put my list away. Councillor Mercer, please.
Councillor Boto has just made the comment I was going to make. We did discuss tandem parking.
Yeah.
It was sort of a compromise. There were some people on either side, and it was decided that a mention would be put in, but we couldn't bar it completely. I would agree with Councillor Maxwell, but that's how it was.
I mean, in the end, the work doesn't go away, and in the end, neither do the cars. So a way will always have to be found. And also, this is a matter of extensions. This is not a matter of new build properties. Okay, Councillor Peacock, please.
Yeah, we're back to the old tandem park again. I support the limit to 2 deep. I think East Northampton have already had an issue with this and an appeal, and they lost it due to tandem parking as well. So we support this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jenny, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, well, basically, I was just going to say what Councillor Peacock just said. I think this document will be very useful for town and parish councils when considering their applications, because quite often you've got lay people who don't really know what they're talking about, and it's laid out very nicely, very simply, very straightforwardly. I think we can use it to educate quite a few.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Brackenbury, can you see me? I put my hand up. So, Councillor Hughes.
Oh no, I didn't. I did not see you, but A, welcome, and B, your hand is duly noted, and please, please come in.
I didn't realise that you couldn't see me. I've been here all the time. I better find out later how that's happened.
Well, what happens, Councillor, is that there are a maximum of 9 images on the screen, right. And everybody else are initials underneath, so you're not always visible, which is why I've requested people go in the chat function, which I note you've just done. So thank you.
Okay, I just wanted, it's the tandem parking. It's obviously a tremendous headache at local planning, and this will be really very helpful. But so when it says 2 tandem parking 2, does that include the vehicle parked in the garage, or does it include the garage space? Because often there is the garage, which they don't use as a garage, but nevertheless it is technically a parking space. So that would say 1 behind.
I think it's 2 behind. So I'll just ask an officer for clarification.
Yeah, well, that would be the case, that it would include, the garage would be an extra space in effect, so it would be 2 off-site park.
Richard, I think you're frozen.
Oh,
right.
Can you? Is that okay?
Yeah. Okay. Richard, what were you saying?
Behind each other. So if the 2 tandem parking are parked behind the garage door, does that count as 3, or is that still 2?
Effectively, that would be 3 with the garage. Yes.
So that wouldn't be allowed.
No, that would be allowed.
Yeah, well, that's a
So
nightmare.
it's 2 cars in the open and 1 car in the garage. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. That would, yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Sure how helpful that is, really, but still.
Well, you have to sometimes play vehicular Tetris, I know, but
Yeah, at least they're off the road. At least they're off the road.
yeah, agree. Okay. Is there anybody else like to comment? Sorry, Councillor Mercer.
The objection to it is that they're not off the road because people don't do that and then they park on the road. That was why we suggested it. But if this is the only compromise we can come to, then it's better than it was. At least it's not 4 as we had before.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Maxwell, please.
The drawback about tandem parking is that it is a major issue when it comes to development, and we know this, that you can't, means that the person in the front can't get out, the person at the back, but it's the fact that it's parking doesn't work.
No.
Okay. Did I lost Dorothy halfway through that? Was that me or was that the meeting?
Right. I mean, my system's still up the spout, but what I said was about tandem parking was it doesn't work, and I feel that with an extension, it would create more problems, not only for the residents but neighbours, but for the fact that you either put too many cars outside a building, and then in fact it means that it clogs up natural parking.
Okay. Well, we did discuss tandem parking at some length in previous discussions. Councillor Lewis, do I see your hand?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it's just a comment really on 3.1 about the 1 metre gap. When a lot of properties are semi-detached when they apply for extensions, and both neighbours will go down the boundary. And I think a metre is a lot of land to lose when you're having an extension. So I hope that councils will not be inclined to apply that too diligently, because you're going to lose a lot of land there just for the sake of going around and using a paintbrush, whereas you could quite easily talk to your neighbour to get access. So I think that a metre is a big width, big distance.
Okay, thank you.
But it is advisory, I agree.
It is apparently best practice. Councillor Jenny, please.
Yeah, just on this point, can I remind councillors that there is something called the Party Wall Acts, and one is allowed to build right up to one's boundary. It cannot be stopped. People have a right, and what Mr. Palmer is advising is best practice. To leave the gap, that means you've got a chance of getting round the side of a house if you're at the end of a pair of semis or a terrace or something like that, but it cannot be mandatory because of the Party Wall Act.
Okay, thank you. That's
Councillor Lewis is absolutely right.
Okay, well, thank you. That is actually quite helpful. Okay, does anybody else wish to speak to this? Okay, in that case, we have got a recommendation at 14.1, and that is that this committee is recommended to adopt the Householder Extensions Guidance as a supplementary planning document based on the document attached in Appendix 1 to this report for the Council to use in determining planning applications and in providing general planning advice. May I have a proposer, please?
Proposed.
And a seconder? I have many. And again by acclamation, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any against?
Yes.
One against. Anybody else? Any abstentions? Thank you. Then the recommendation is, the recommendation is carried. And it was pleasing a few moments ago that somebody was saying how useful the extensions SPD would be for town and parish councils. So I'm now moving to some excellent work carried out by one of our parish councils, or one of our parish meetings to be exact, and that is agenda item 9, which is the Cotterstock Village Design Statement supplementary planning document, which is with you for consideration. And I have to say I've read through it, and it's a very, very good document. Anyway, is it Richard yet again?
No, it's Anne doing
No,
this.
it's Anne. It's Anne. I'm sorry, and I just haven't turned up the right page. Apologies, Anne, and welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased to present the Cotterstock Village Design Statement. And just a bit of background, after the adoption of Clapthorne's Neighbourhood Plan in 2018, members of the Cotterstock community considered their own options, and they came to the conclusion that the Village Design Statement approach would be more appropriate to their needs than a neighbourhood plan. A village design statement is prepared by the community to provide a more detailed guidance on the design of new development in their locality. Should the committee approve the draft, after a formal consultation of 6 weeks, it is proposed that the VDS be adopted as a supplementary planning document, SPD, to become a statutory local development plan document, such as the last item. After carrying out a village survey, which was well supported by the community with an outturn and response rate of 85% over the 66 households, the VDS was drafted by a working group comprising members of the Cotterstock Parish Meeting and was presented to East Northamptonshire Council in September 2019. The survey led to a range of guidelines being developed to cover the following themes: landscape, buildings and design, highways and street furniture and amenities. Informed by the village design survey, excuse me, I'm sorry, my voice is going. The VDS aims to set out a distinctive local vision for Cotterstock Village for the period up to 2031, corresponding with the current local plan, to ensure that future development within the parish acknowledges the existing landscape character and settlement pattern, and that planning applications have taken these into account, to protect the unique character and appearance of the conservation area, which covers the historic core, the eastern part of the current village, and to protect important views, landscape character, open spaces, mature trees, natural landscaping features, wildlife and natural environments. So to conclude, member approval is sought to undertake a public consultation on the Cotterstock Village Design Statement prior to adopting it as a statutory supplementary planning document. This is anticipated to be this autumn 2020. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Anne. And I'd just like, and I said this, I think I've said this before, I'd just like to offer my congratulations to everybody in Cotterstock who is involved in drawing up this document and the officers who supported them. It is a good document. Indeed, I learned a great deal of history about the local area leafing through it, and it does seem to cover the wishes and the requirements of the local community very, very well. So would anybody like to, oh yes, yes, so we've got David Jenny to speak on this, and I'm just trying to think, there's somebody else waved their hand and I was trying to read the chat all at the same time. So Councillor Maxwell, David Jenny first, Councillor Maxwell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Like you, I read it and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's not often that I sort of read 40 or 50 pages and have a report and actually come out thinking that was really fun. But you know, it's really good, and I would commend the officers that have been involved. And I would like that it's nice when the officers and the residents of the particular area can work together and come up with an exceedingly sound document. I wish other places would pay attention. Thank you.
Thank you in turn. That's very much. I note that did Councillor Maxwell, did you have your hand up? Yes, please.
I would have to say that this report, having read it, it's nice to see that they've consulted the residents, and when they come back, having the consultation after 6 weeks, I think it's excellent to see officers and the village, Cottesthorpe, working together. It's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. And a local hero in terms of this document, Councillor Voles, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to comment. Firstly, this is the work of 3 people who have, one of whom is fully employed as a senior officer with Ofsted, and 2 others in the village who've done all this work with enormous support from the village. But the work's really been done by 3 people. I think it's a good document. It really started actually with Waddenhoe's village design statement long before Glapthorne. It's been a long time in the incubation, and I would like to commend this document and ask the committee to endorse it and to forward it for Cottesthorpe to go out for consultation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor. So that's excellent, and I'll take that, if I may, Councillor, as a proposal.
Please, yes.
Thank you. And therefore, we have the recommendation at 14.1, and that is for the parish of Cottesthorpe. The committee is recommended to approve the draft Cottesthorpe Village Design Statement for a 6-week period of consultation in accordance with the requirements of the Town and Country Planning, Local Planning England Regulations 2012, Regulations 12 and 35, and Statement of Community Involvement adopted September 2019. So 6 weeks of consultation. I have a proposer. May I have a seconder, please?
Seconded, Chairman.
Thank you. And all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any against? There are not. Are there any abstentions? It seems this has been adopted unanimously, and once again, well done to everybody involved in formulating this document. It's a great piece of work. Brilliant.
Chairman, if I may.
Yeah.
I know we have one item left on the agenda, but we are close to 9 o'clock, just to let you know if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Just talk about that.
This would be a good moment. It is. We have to agree that the meeting goes over 2 hours. It looks like it probably will. May I have a proposer that we extend the meeting, please?
Move for a limited time, Chairman.
It should be for a relatively limited time, Councillor North, and how pleasant to see your cheery face as well. Anyway, we have a proposer. May I have a seconder, please?
Seconded.
Well done, Councillor Mercer, always in. All those in favour, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes, majority, yes, okay.
Are there any against?
Could you mute me again, please?
You were already muted, I think.
Are there any against? There are not. Are there any abstentions?
So am I muted now?
No.
No, we can hear you, Councillor Reichhold.
There are no abstentions. We can carry on. So we now move to the agenda item 10, which is the annual position statement. It's a very important discussion here. because we had some serious difficulties with the 5-year housing land supply owing to a particular decision made by the planning inspectorate. So it will be quite valuable to receive this paper. So I'm going to ask Michael to give the statement on the 5-year housing land supply, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Thank you. Right. Members will recall that on the 17th of December, we agreed the 5-year housing land supply at 6.03 years, just over 6 years. No sooner had this been agreed than it was challenged by Lurette Developments, in this case, which Councillor Carter and I attended the hearing, and it was quite interesting, to say the least. This hearing took place on the 8th of January, where we presented some updated housing land supply information, which would have the effect of increasing the housing land supply by 58 dwellings. That's a marginal increase up to 6.16 years. And there's an explanation at paragraphs 2.1 to 2.2, which gives you the more detail about the figures there. Now, the appeal decision was released on 24th of January, and the inspector fundamentally upheld the appeal and reduced the housing land supply from 6.03 to 4.28 years. Now, we as members will probably be aware, weren't terribly happy about this decision, not least as we had a costs award against us. So, following our deliberations, it was decided that we would challenge the appeal decision through a Section 288 appeal to the High Court, and that was on the 6th of March. Now, this was then. To put it bluntly, the Secretary of State accepted our case straight away. Use the adjective. They folded, the Secretary of State, and the upshot of it was that there's now been a draft, what's called a draft consent order, which has the effect of quashing both the inspector's decision and the award of costs. So, in a nutshell, the inspector had incorrectly interpreted the NPPF and Planning Practice Guide in defining what is a deliverable site. In other words, we've been vindicated in our approach, and the inspector was actually incorrect on this occasion. Well, the outcome of this appeal is that now the Secretary of State has agreed to pay the majority of East Northamptonshire Council's costs, and that's legal costs in relation to the High Court challenge. And as a result, we notwithstanding, we'd still need to produce an updated housing land supply position. So what we've done really, this report that I've produced, it links very much to the 17th December report. But it is an updated housing land supply position incorporating the revised figures that were presented to the hearing back on the 8th of January. So there is quite a lot of detailed information, particularly in Appendix 2. But really, I'll just come to the headline figures to recap. 473 dwellings were delivered over the 2018 to 19 monitoring years, which takes us to 134 ahead of the JCS requirement. And the 5-year land supply requirement is 2,205 dwellings, or 441 a year, which includes an obligatory 5% buffer, which equates, and now the current deliverable supply now is 2,718 dwellings, and that's well above the requirement for 2,205, which now sets our housing land supply at 6.16 years. I think finally, though, to wrap up, it should be noted this report is presented for information, but I would stress it is very important we have this out there as a published position statement, because this is going to be a reference point for many in the development industry and for our development management colleagues. So I'd obviously commend it to the committee. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Michael, and it's certainly very interesting to have had a blow-by-blow description of the way that the disaster of the reduction of our housing and land supply to 4.28 suddenly got totally reversed. It's most unusual and very a matter of much relief. So I've got Councillor Maxwell, Councillor Jill Mercer, and Councillor North and Councillor Jenny. So Councillor Maxwell, please.
Hello, Chair. What I would like to say on behalf of the residents is that the two applications which are in Northampton Road was never agreed to. So the one for 65 houses, which is still there, is still going to be opposed by the residents. And I feel that whilst some people won't be happy, I think that residents should be consulted before they're put in the neighbourhood plan. Whilst they think they weren't.
Okay. Well, Councillor, I think you're talking about a planning management issue anyway. Right. If you're talking about an planning application, and obviously, if a site is unable to be brought forward for whatever reason, then it does indeed have a slight impact on our 5-year housing land supply. But there are, we have to wait and see what the outcome is. So, as I say, I think we're really talking about a planning management issue with respect to the Northampton Road application. Councillor Mercer, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was just referring to Appendix 3, where a number of sites are listed as included in the 5-year land supply. I noticed a couple of them are down as withdrawn. Could the officers explain to me if that is acceptable, that an application has gone in and then been withdrawn? Does that, it may just be a technicality on that particular application. And also we've got quite a few that say adopted DPD allocation, including the new one for Manor Park. I just wonder if you could point me at which plan that is adopted, because obviously that's a very new one, and I wasn't aware that was in, or I haven't got any problem with it.
Apologies, I forgot to unmute myself. Michael, would you like to quickly comment on that?
Yeah, certainly. And I think Councillor Mercer raised some very good points. The sites that are obviously in there below what I was called the grey bar, they're the sites and those were the sites that were heavily disputed during the hearing. So it's very much, what can we see coming forward, even if an application has been withdrawn. If there are more often not, as Councillor Mercer said, there are maybe technical reasons. It's not some case, it's simply that there are accumulation of small development management matters mean that the scheme as moved as proposed isn't acceptable. I mean, that's often the case, but it's not, particularly where you have brownfield sites within the urban area. By their nature, they are constrained. So it's very much, can we see that site being developed or released for development? If the answer is yes, we can, then we should be obviously looking to see it brought forward if it's going to bring a beneficial, sustainable development. So that's what I would really emphasise on that. But I think, as Councillor Brackenbury has already said, the removal of sites from the housing land supply then has other wider implications, which we're all very too familiar. But yeah, I mean, and endorsed by the inspector was that virtually the whole of that lot should all be struck out the housing land supply. So, which would mean that we'd never be in a position to have a 5-year land supply. So I'm very pleased about the outcome of that.
Yeah, so are we, and indeed in terms of costs as well. I know you'll never get it all back, but still, it's very welcome.
Chairman, could I have an answer to the second part about the adopted DPD, please?
Yes, Michael.
Well, the adopted DPD, and the reason it says DPD is because it's both. It could be a neighbourhood plan or the Rural Northumberland and Thrapston plan, which is the current local plan part 2. So that's why it says adopted development plan document. In many cases, it's a neighbourhood plan. In fact, in most cases, a neighbourhood plan.
But we mustn't forget some areas which don't wish to have neighbourhood plans. So yeah, anyway, I get it. Okay, thank you. Councillor North, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and many of you would have heard me ask this before. Certainly, and it's very welcome that we got our 5-year land supply back. But of course, this time next year we're not going to be here because of Unitary. Now, I have asked this at the highest government level and haven't had a clarified answer yet, Mr. Chairman, because you know, in relation to a lot of councils around the country that have gone to Unitary, they've been absorbed by the county council. So they've stayed with, in most respects, stayed with their sovereign 5-year land supplies for a period of time. Have we any real clarity yet, Mr. Chairman? If we could get officer advice, there's plenty of conjecture, but real clarity whether we're going to stick with the 5-year land supply for sovereign council areas for a period of time, or we're going to go to a Northamptonshire 5-year land supply. Like you, I'm very conscious that we've got a core spatial strategy. It's obviously quite unique in the country in relation to that, because obviously that was a statutory instrument and it's a body in its own right, and those figures are reported on a Northamptonshire basis. If it is on a Northamptonshire basis, obviously that has some kind of differences in relation to the 5-year land supply, and I am still concerned, Chairman, that we have absolutely no clear clarity whether we're going to stay with the sovereign council 5-year land supplies for a period of time, or we're going to go to a Northamptonshire 5-year land supply. And if we haven't absolute clarity, Chairman, then maybe this is a time that we actually ask for we ask in writing, and we go to CLG or the ministry to actually ask for clarity on this, because I actually think it's a very, very important issue that has not been clarified yet, and I think could impact us in relation to delivery. Certainly if we are, and I'm only suggesting, but if we are hitting a recession or we're hitting a downturn in the housing market because of COVID, you know, it's a very serious situation to be in.
Right, thank you very much, Councillor, and you indeed raise a very important point, because of whether to have an aggregated 5-year housing land supply among 4 authorities, or whether we stick to the sovereign ones that have been independently assessed for the needs of the individual areas. It's a very, very good point. Mr. Bland has volunteered to answer this one, so I'll just ask him to speak now.
Thank you, Chairman. The brief answer to Councillor North's question is no, there isn't any clarity as yet on this matter. Clearly, it's a very important matter that we do need to work through as part of the local government review process. You can be assured that through the Chief Planning Officers group and through the Executive Director of Growth and Infrastructure that the question is being posed, and as soon as we do have an answer for you, we'll get back to you. But as of this moment, there's no definitive response on it.
Okay.
Chairman, well, if I could come back on that, I really appreciate the works going on with the Chief Planning Officer groups and the advice given. But I've been asking at the highest level in meetings and conversations with CLG, and we're not actually getting a definitive answer. And as I said, I just wondered actually if it would be any beneficial that this council actually writes for that clarification, and no disrespect to the Chief Officer group, but actually as a council that we write for clarity and see if we probably won't get an answer, but it might be worth an opportunity to do so, Chairman.
Well, I would certainly support that, Councillor, and I would associate myself with any letter being written. I agree with you. Mr. Palmer, Richard Palmer just wanted to add something.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just adding to what Paul mentioned through the CPOs, I know that some of the work ongoing there through the wider team, the policy team as well, is looking at the implications next year of the local housing need, because there is an additional measurement of housing need that kicks in once the adopted plan becomes older than 5 years, and come July next year the core strategy will be over 5 years old, so that local housing need will come into the mix in terms of the supply position as well. Officers are looking into the implications of that for you, and I think it's something we can keep you abreast of through reports to the Planning Policy Committee as things unfold, if you like. Certainly we've been in discussions as well through part of that wider team to look at what's been done down in Dorset, for example, where they've had similar issues to us in terms of going into unitaries. I think it's fair to say that different councils have taken different approaches, and there may be some sort of interim arrangements, but at this point in time I think it's best that we keep you up to date through reports to the Planning Policy Committee. In any respect, I think the Joint Planning Committee will also provide some update on the position as well, so hopefully that's helpful, but the local housing need is an issue that we will need to consider into next year as well. What I would say on that before I finish, sorry, would be that the calculations of that are yet to become clear in terms of how the government would provide the weighting and ultimately the supply that would come out of that. We're not aware of that at the moment, so that's something we'd have to watch closely as well. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Richard. I mean, obviously, it will be very important to ascertain how the future 5-year housing land supply is going to be taken forward, and whether we want to actually make an approach to the communities and local government unilaterally, you know, is important, because obviously if it's going to be a matter discussed by the JPC, well, that's one thing, but we need, you know, we all need clarity in this. I think it's useful strategically. Okay. I've got Councillor Jenny, Councillor Voles and Councillor Maxwell. Councillor Jenny, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, firstly, I'd like to commend the officers for the brilliant work they did in sorting out the inspectorate. That was done with great speed and style and elan, and well done. I've noted the comments about going to the JPC with on land supply, and I'm sure we can do something about that. I've just got one question, which I think I know the answer, but I'd love to have Michael confirm it. Is that the Earthlingborough West site, the 750 houses, is excluded from the next 5 years in delivery? So the lack of that site coming forward is not going to affect our figures for the next 5 years.
Yes, Councillor Jenny, that is absolutely correct. I can confirm that we've taken Earthlingborough West out. We are hopeful that it may, if things can get resolved and moving, it may start to deliver towards the end of the plan period beyond 2026. But as far as a 5-year land supply issue, we won't go there. We really do not. Yeah, we have to always be cautious with the 5-year land supply. A lot of local authorities have been caught out with this by being overly optimistic. And I know there's been a recent appeal case where COVID-19 has actually been raised as an issue in terms of delivery trajectory. So it's very important that we're cautious.
I'm sure members will be relieved to know Earthlingborough West doesn't feature in there, because we've all been quite worried about that one. So that's good.
I confirm that's the case.
Well, caution is the word, Councillor. You're absolutely right, and we were all somewhat concerned about Earthlingborough West. Right, Councillor Voles, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm concerned on a different level. I'm not quite sure. I still don't really understand how officers have come forward with these particular sites. Let me, I am obviously thrilled that we seem to have found a solution to our problems that we had in January with the Planning Inspectorate. Those actually screwed a Planning Management Committee meeting badly against the people of Oundle, who are to a man opposed to one development that went through because there was the veiled threat that we didn't have a 5-year housing land supply, and therefore we couldn't argue with the developer on that particular case. On the other site that is coming up for decision by Planning Management, the Planning Inspectorate themselves on the 29th of September 2014 said that this is not in the RNOT plan, this is not an appropriate site, and in any event, I'm not convinced building housing on previously undeveloped greenfield site outside the settlement is in circumstances where the council can demonstrate. The Planning Inspectorate said in this document in 2014 that one of the sites that we've got down here as one of our key sites is not a relevant site. Councillor Peacock said earlier on, please listen to us. We are the local people. We are reacting. We know that in the overall consultation document for this draft plan, over half of the responses were negative. They were nearly all from the Oundle area, and they were nearly all negative because of the housing allocations and for no other reason. We all want the draft plan to go through, but I happen to live in a ward, represent a ward with 2 others, where the community is wholly opposed to what their district council is trying to do. And they're talking about, well, they've had discussions with officers and with their ward members and with various people over these years. I find it difficult to be able to stand by this document, which great document it is, and I'm thrilled that it gives us a 6.16 years supply, but I find it difficult when the Planning Inspectorate themselves have said that one site shown here is actually not appropriate. I'd be grateful for some advice on that.
Okay. Well, thank you, Councillor, and we all appreciate the passions that this has been raising in Oundle. Mr. Palmer, Richard, you were going to come back on this.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chair. Well, times change. I mean, 2014 was prior to the adoption of the current Joint Core Strategy, which changes not only the planned period but the housing requirements. So I think it's difficult to say that if a site was not suitable at one point in time or wasn't required as opposed to wasn't being suitable, and I think that might be the case for the site in question, that doesn't mean to say that will be the case forever and a day. Sometimes it's the right site at the wrong time. Once you revise your housing requirements through a newly adopted plan, that sets effectively a new level of development which needs to be taken on board through the plan period, as we currently have at the start of this meeting, if you like, through the Rushton Lakes West site that we've proposed, that we need to meet minimum requirements through the plan period. And the same goes for other areas of the district where we're making allocations in this Part 2 plan. The headline figures have changed. The detail behind that then follows. That's the position we're in there. But I think what we've received from this report, and the outcome has been very much in favour of the council, that we have a land supply in excess of 5 years, and therefore we can be successful in refusing applications where they come up that are not in line with plan making, and that's a good position for the council to be in. That's really all I can say on the matter, but certainly times have changed since 2014.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Maxwell, please.
I would like to say that actually I agree with Councillor North about the government making it clarify exactly where we actually stand in the future, because in the Sunday Times this week, Mr. Cummings we all know, has decided to get involved with planning applications in the future. And if Mr. Cummings then goes ahead with what he wants to do, this plan, which is very good, very well laid out, means that we may not be able to have a say what we want in the future in this area.
Okay, well, obviously the actions of Mr. Cummings are something somewhat extrajudicial. I mean, you know, he's not a member of the government, and what I have often made the point that everything we do does have to be in conformity with national policy, whatever it is. So if government change national policy, then that's something that will affect everybody. But obviously at the moment we have to go on the rules as they are. So, ladies and gentlemen, is there anybody else would like to speak to this? Okay. Well, I'll turn you then to the recommendation at 14.1. And that is 14.11. The committee is recommended to note the updated schedule of sites and phasing assumptions used in the calculation of the 5-year housing land supply figure at Appendix 3, which constitute...
Just...
Yes, I'm sorry?
No, okay.
Councillor Peacock.
I think Councillor Mercer wants to speak.
Yeah.
I just wanted to pick up Councillor North's point. Possibly writing to the government and specifically asking the question. I'd be happy to second that if he's proposing that.
Well, I think I already associated myself with it as well. So,
yeah, whatever.
Well, thank you both. I was going to suggest an additional recommendation, Chair, when we got to it, when you've gone through the current recommendations. Thank you both for your support. What I was going to propose and will propose is an additional to those recommendations that we do write to MHCLG, but I'll let you go through the obviously the recommendations as printed, Chair, but I would like to make that addition when we get to it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Well, let's do 1 and 2, and then we can compose a 3. So I've read the Appendix 3, which constitute the Council's annual position statement to be included in the 2019 Authorities Monitoring Report. That is recommendation 1. Recommendation 2 is updated housing year land supply calculation for 1st of April 2019 against the submitted North Northamptonshire Joint Core Strategy Policy 28, Table 4, 6.16 years, applying a 5% buffer.
Bless you.
Keep going.
Okay. And recommendation 3 would be something to the tune of invite the council to write to MHCLG to determine the future application of 5-year housing land supply, whether it be in sovereign council areas or a Northamptonshire aggregated total. I mean, somebody cleverer than me can work the wording, but does that more or less meet your wishes, Councillor North?
Yes, thank you, Chair. That does. We do need to actually seek some clarification from CLG, and as I said earlier, certainly respect ongoing officer discussions, but we really do need to start bottoming out some proper official correspondence to see exactly where we sit, because we're not getting it at the moment. Well, I'm glad I've astounded you, Chairman, with my suggestion.
You've frozen everybody.
Stunned him, absolutely stunned him.
It's frozen.
I'm sorry, I froze.
It's the power of my speech, Chairman. Sorry about that.
You completely knackered my computer. It was terrible, but it's a council one. So anyway, no problem. Okay, so we now have the 3 recommendations. May I put them on block?
Then, Chairman.
I have. Do I have a proposer on block?
Yep.
Opposed, yep.
Right.
Seconder.
Okay,
Yep.
and a seconder.
Yep.
Yep. Right, by acclamation, all those in favour?
Aye.
Are there any against?
Yes.
Okay, one against. Are there any abstentions?
Yes.
Okay, one abstention. All right. Well, that's carried. And that concludes the formal agenda of tonight's meeting. I note that Mr. Bland has suggested that the final wording of the letter to MHCLG be delegated to Head of Planning Services in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chairman of this committee. And I hope that will meet and the leader and deputy leader, and I hope that will meet with everybody's approval.
Great.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. In that case, that leads us to the end of this meeting. Always tricky to do these things virtually, but thank you all very much for your patience. Thank you all very much for your contributions, which have all been taken into consideration. And I won't wish you all a safe journey home as I usually do, because I think many of you will be there. But I do thank you very much for your attendance, and I declare the meeting closed.
Thank you, Chairman.
Good night, colleagues.
Thank you. Very good.
Thank you. Good night.
Well done. Cheers.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
We'll meet again.
Everything now ended. Right. Do you want me to-
Just click on that one. Just
Which
cringe.
one?
No, no, go on.
That?
Yeah.
Yes.
There it is.
Now click on the X.